Welcome to Blackstone Intelligence. I'm Jake Morphonios. On the 7th of October, Americans awoke to the news that President Trump had announced the immediate withdrawal of U.S. troops from Syria. And like a lot of non-interventionists, I was very happy with that. And I said so, and I wrote this on Twitter, quote, "I think that Trump's decision to withdraw U.S. troops from Syria is a good decision. Unfortunately, by withdrawal, it's probably going to just be redeployment to other theaters, such as Iraq, for most soldiers. First, Trump's ego has to resist the backlash." And I told my viewers on YouTube that the reason that I was cautious in my praise of Donald Trump's proclamation about this troop withdrawal was because I remembered how the president had previously tried to withdraw troops and withered under pressure. So let's quickly review this. The reasons for this October 2019 troop withdrawal announcement. They were originally blurry in that first 24 hours, but it became clear very quickly what had happened. What had happened was that Turkish President Erdogan had called President Trump and told him that he was going to move forward with a massive military invasion of northern Syria. So President Trump's sudden announcement about U.S. troop withdrawal was not just some principled decision that he made, that he's going to order the withdrawal of troops because he doesn't think they should be there, so much as what it really was a disorderly retreat, a capitulation to President Erdogan's demands to move the U.S. troops out of the way. But, of course, to save face, what President Trump did was he went out, as he usually does, onto Twitter, and he tweeted this, quote, "As I have stated strongly before, and just to reiterate, if Turkey does anything that I, in my great and unmatched wisdom, consider to be off limits, I will totally destroy and obliterate the economy of Turkey. I've done before." Tough talk, bold rhetoric, but despite all of this tough talk, President Erdogan was not worried. He proceeded to send these Islamist militias that he funds into these Syrian villages, and they began a campaign of ethnic cleansing against the Kurdish population, which is a broad mix of groups: Christians, Muslims, Yazidi, just a lot of different groups. And within 24 to 48 hours, it was clear this was a brutal campaign. Hundreds of civilians were quickly slaughtered. Images of children with their limbs blown off, turned to hamburger. These photos and videos were horrifying. Bloodied bodies, burnt civilians. All of these images start to flood in to social media. So when President Trump said that in his great and unmatched wisdom, if Turkey went too far, he would do such and such. Well, if that's not enough, what is? The Turkish forces were not satisfied, though, with the initial troop retreat that the President of the United States had ordered. So what they did was Turkey began shelling around a U.S. base to dislodge U.S. soldiers from that area as well. So in response, what did the President of the United States do? He tweeted some more, making more threats about economic obliteration. But it was clear to President Erdogan that under Donald Trump, the U.S. military could be pushed around. And so they continued their advance. And so this vacillation has resulted in unprecedented rebukes from defense officials at the Pentagon, as well as members of the president's own party. Now, granted, these people are loyal to this New World Order deep state agenda of using the U.S. military and the CIA to go around destabilizing nations, stealing oil, helping Israel with its geopolitical ambitions, and so forth. And so for that reason, you have to take, what all of these groups say with a grain of salt, or maybe with a bag of salt. President Trump was even rebuked, though, by his own evangelical base, which I found to be especially distressing, that it would be Christians who were speaking out in terms of Donald Trump losing his, quote, mandate from heaven if he withdrew from Syria. But the most outspoken of these various critics was one of the president's staunchest allies, at least outwardly, and that's Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina. Graham accused the president of cowardice. He accused him of capitulation, of betrayal, of giving new life to the ISIS terror network. So when I said back in October, on October 7th, in that tweet, that Trump was going to have to fortify his ego to resist the backlash that I knew was going to result, this kind of stuff from the defense industry, from the pawns like Lindsey Graham, from the evangelical Christian Zionist space, this is what I was talking about. And as I had immediately predicted there in the early morning hours, as soon as the news came out about this withdrawal, as the weeks wore on, President Trump decided not to bring the troops home from Syria. Instead, what he did was he moved them, or at least some of them, over into the war zone in Iraq, which is just a few hundred miles to the east, from where they were stationed in northern Syria. Simultaneously, the same week that he does this, he orders an increase of 2,000 to 3,000 more troops to be deployed to Saudi Arabia, basically using our U.S. military to function as human shields to protect the Saudi royals, the regime, from reprisals resulting from their ongoing ethnic cleansing in Yemen. And of course, this is all about Iranian aggression, and we'll pretend like this isn't really a result of Israel and the Saudis and the United States meddling in other nations' affairs. But here's the thing. Today, we also learned that it's not just that the president is moving troops out of Syria into Iraq. The fact is he has completely walked back his original order to withdraw troops completely from Syria. He indicated today that he's now going to be leaving at least hundreds of U.S. troops in Syria. Why? To defend the oil fields that the U.S. has taken control of. Oil fields that we are illegally and immorally occupying. The Christian Zionists make the argument that if Trump leaves, he loses the mandate of heaven. In my opinion, heaven would be far more pleased with him relinquishing control over stolen assets. But, call me crazy. Just that whole thing about thou shalt not steal seems to resonate a little bit more with me than the alternative. So this has really just been a shell game, where what the president has done is he has put our U.S. troops under a cup and has shuffled it around the board in the Middle East, only to have them disappear here but pop up over here in other war zones. So this is not a troop withdrawal. This is not a pullback from the Middle East. It's nothing more than a repositioning of troops. Now, immediately following this announcement today that the president is leaving troops in Syria, the deep state agent, the representative of the military-industrial complex, Senator Lindsey Graham, rewarded the president with public praise, saying that he's impressed with the president's out-of-the-box thinking. This really, one of the jobs that I do outside of YouTube reporting and stuff like that is dog breeding. And so seeing the way that Senator Graham handles the president reminds me of a dog trainer giving a dog a treat to psychologically reinforce the dog's compliance with a targeted behavior. He's learning a trick, you give him a treat. Lindsey Graham is a Svengali. He's manipulating the president like the president is a marionette. Graham is the Stromboli to Trump's Pinocchio. So this October 2019 incident, this is not something new. This is actually the third time in Trump's presidency that he has promised to pull troops out, only to capitulate to these deep state players who stand up and oppose him. And that says a lot, at least in my mind. This goes back to March 30th of last year, 2018, when President Trump announced, quote, "We're going to be coming out of there real soon, going to get back to our country, where we belong, where we want to be." He lamented that the United States has spent $7 trillion in the Middle East and got nothing for it. And he also instructed the White House to release a statement indicating that U.S. presence in Syria was, quote, "coming to a rapid end." Of course, his announcement that he was going to bring U.S. forces back to the United States, quote, "very soon," drew swift condemnation from the Washington establishment, as well as from the state of Israel. Because Israel has, for decades, been fomenting discord in Syria with the aim of toppling the government there and bringing about a regime that it prefers, one that's willing to play ball, grant concessions to Israel. So following Trump's March 2018 announcement, the press in Israel reported, quote, "a tense conversation between President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu over this plan to withdraw troops." So that pressure from Israel played a huge role in President Trump's decision to keep U.S. forces in Syria. Less than 1 week, just a matter of days after the president said he was pulling troops out, President Trump buckled under the pressure, and he agreed to keep troops there in Syria. The New York Times reported on April 4th that President Trump retracted his order for an immediate withdrawal, but he wanted to bring U.S. forces back home to the United States, quote, "within a few months." That's within a few months of late March 2018. Well, 9 months after that announcement to withdraw all of the U.S. troops and bring them home to the United States, they were still in Syria. None of them had been brought home. Now, let's skip forward. Skip forward to December of 2018. On the 19th, President Trump ordered the withdrawal of all 2,000 American troops in Syria. He said, "That's it. It's time to bring them home." And he tweeted, quote, "We have defeated ISIS in Syria. My only reason for being there during the Trump presidency." Remember that. The only reason that the President of the United States has troops in Syria is to defeat ISIS. Trump's own words. Well, that same week, the president made a surprise visit over Christmas to the U.S. troops that are stationed in Iraq. And he told them this, quote, "There will be a strong, deliberate, and orderly withdrawal of U.S. forces from Syria." And he estimated that it would be done within 30 days. And he even posted a video on Twitter explaining this. He said of these U.S. troops in Syria, quote, "They're all coming back, and they're coming back now. We won." But that 2018 decision to pull the troops out, he did the same thing that he had done back in April, a complete reversal. And it only took a few days for President Trump to reverse his decision. So no troops were brought home. Now, skip forward to October of 2019, when we have this third instance of promises made, promises broken. Not only are hundreds of troops going to remain in Syria to protect these stolen oil fields, which, again, this conflicts with the president's claim that the only reason we're in Syria is to fight ISIS. But the fact is, none of the troops are being brought home to the United States. Those who are not leaving Syria, they're just being redeployed slightly to the east to go fight in Iraq. So once again, we have this capitulation. And we also learned today that a major factor in President Trump's decision to stay in the area and to keep troops in Syria is because of Israel. On October 21st, the president told reporters this, quote, I don't think it's necessary, other than we secure the oil in a little different section of Syria. And the other region where we've been asked by Israel and Jordan to leave a small number of troops is a totally different section of Syria, near Jordan, close to Israel. That's a totally different section, a totally different mindset.
We don't think it's going to be necessary. I don't want to leave troops there. It's very dangerous. I don't think it's necessary, other than that we secured the oil. It's in a little different section, but we just secured the oil. And the other region where we've been asked by Israel and Jordan to leave a small number of troops is a totally different section of Syria, near Jordan and close to Israel. And that's a totally different section. That's a totally different mindset.
It isn't just Israel that is dictating to President Trump. Turkey is also pushing the president around. And what we're seeing playing out today, this is not new. If we go back to December of 2018, to that withdrawal announcement, and consider the reason behind the December announcement, we find that what happened then, what precipitated that decision, is essentially the same thing that just happened in October of 2019. President Erdogan of Turkey contacted President Trump and said, look, I am going to invade Syria. You've got troops in the way. Move them. And that caused President Trump to have a knee-jerk reaction. If we go back and pull the Washington Post from December 14th of last year, we read this, quote, top administration officials, including President Trump, scrambled this week to head off Turkish attack against U.S. Kurdish allies in northern Syria after President Erdogan announced an imminent assault. In a telephone call Friday with Erdogan, Trump discussed Turkey's concerns, and the two, quote, agreed to continue coordinating to achieve our respective security objectives in Syria, the White House stated. Now, if we combined these various incidents together, we can see the similarities between them. You see a pattern here. President Erdogan tells President Trump he's going to invade Syria. President Trump responds by announcing, USA, we've already won, and he announces an immediate withdrawal. Then you have the U.S. lawmakers who are loyal to this political agenda of Israel. They respond in a coordinated opposition, and they go out on the media circuit and they shame the president, which is a sure way to weaken President Trump's resolve, because you know how he hates bad press. It's a very psychologically triggering thing for him. And you then have Israel contact President Trump and tell him that he is not to remove U.S. troops. So the president complies and casts aside all of these promises that he has just made about withdrawing troops. But he continues to publicly boast about how he's America first and everything that he's doing is for the good of America. Now, those that take President Trump at his word, rather than paying attention to his actions, they're likely going to see President Trump as a non-interventionist, someone who wants to bring the troops home out of the Middle East. But remember, politicians are skilled at telling people what they want to hear, at gaining their trust, and then turning around and stabbing their constituents in the back and doing something that is usually the polar opposite of what they promised they were going to do. And that is why, ladies and gentlemen of America, if you've not learned this lesson yet, learn it now. We should not put our faith in the words of politicians. Jesus said that it is by the fruit produced by a tree that we can tell what kind of a tree it is. So while I appreciate that President Trump says the things I like to hear, that simply isn't good enough for me. I expect him to produce fruit. The fruit is fulfilling his promises. The fact is that candidate Trump promised hundreds of times on the campaign trail that he was going to end foreign wars. He was going to bring troops home to America if we entrusted him with the keys to the White House. But once in office, President Trump has been a very different creature. He has increased U.S. troop involvement in foreign wars. He has carried out cruise missile strikes in response to deep state false flag operations. He has given the brutal Saudi regime billions of dollars in weapons and in military support as they carry out their genocidal campaign against Yemen. President Trump has increased the number of mercenary forces in places like Afghanistan. He has increased U.S. troop presences all throughout the Middle East. He has brought us to the brink of a new war with Iran. So some people choose to have blind faith in the president. I just have a difference of opinion. I believe more along the lines of what the Apostle Paul taught. He said that faith without works is dead. He said, you may say you have faith, but you cannot say you have faith unless you demonstrate your faith by following it up with action. So until the president stops increasing U.S. troop deployments to the Middle East, until he brings our soldiers home to their families, I cannot and will not, in good conscience, praise him for doing little more than giving us false hope. I expect the president to end U.S. involvement in these non-defensive, unconstitutional foreign wars. No amount of grandstanding, no amount of propaganda spin by the president or his followers is going to change my mind. Actions matter more than words. Bring the troops home. Period. The end. For Blackstone Intelligence, I'm Jake Morfonios.
If you appreciate hard-hitting investigative journalism that you won't get from the mainstream media, then please support Jake's research and analysis at patreon.com/endtimesnewsreport, paypal.me/endtimesnewsreport, or send a check or money order to Jake Morfonios, P.O. Box 1333, Kernersville, North Carolina 27285.